Here. My name's Ed Selich. If I can have your attention. Small conversations can stop. Okay. All right. My name's Ed Selich, president of Speak Up Newport. I want to welcome you to our March program. Before we get started, I want to give thanks to the Bungalow for putting on our reception out here. Hope you enjoyed it. Be sure and support Jim Walker and the Bungalow. They help Speak Up Newport out a lot. Also, we've got a few VIPs here tonight, former council members, the former Mayor Keith Curry. Keith, I know you're here. Former Mayor Rush Hill. Rush, over here. Former Mayor Nancy Gardner. Mayor Pro Tem Joe Stapleton. And did I see Jeff Herdman here? Is he here? I guess not. All right. Those are our VIP. Oh, Don Webb. Walking Don Webb, former mayor. All right, any other important people? Raise your hands. All right, Bill, thank you. Anyway, Seimone Jurjis, our Community Development Director, is going to give us a presentation on what's going on with implementing our housing element. As most of you know, we've been working on it for the last few years. We're under a mandate from the state for a little under 5,000 new housing units, about half of those in the affordable category. And just to remind you of Seimone's qualifications, he was selected as a Community Development Director in August of 2017. He was previously the city's chief building official, and he was promoted to city manager just recently. Excuse me. Somebody scratched out the word assistant. Did you do that? Did you scratch that out? Assistant city manager last July. He has over 25 years of experience working in both the private and public sectors. Prior to joining Newport Beach, he was president and chief operating officer for a real estate company focusing on entitlements, land transactions, and development. And prior to that, he served as director of planning and building safety for the city of El Segundo, where he had also been the city engineer and building official. He's got a bachelor's degree in civil engineering. He's a licensed professional civil engineer, licensed real estate broker, a certified building official, and he's also a pilot, licensed pilot. He was raised in the city of Orange and currently lives there with his wife and 2 children. And with that, I'll give you Seimone Jurjis.
Thank you, Ed. And thank you to everybody. Thank you for having me today. Hopefully you can hear me pretty well. All right. So I don't have a mic. I'm just going to use this microphone. I don't have a mobile mic, so we're going to go ahead and start. So if you remember, those of you, I did this presentation 4.5 years ago when the state talked about housing, the California housing crisis. And so a lot of you were here that time. 4.5 years ago, we talked about it, and what was the plan at that time? So the state said, we need housing, 3.5 million housing units by year 2025. And so since then, somebody throw out a number, how many housing units have we built since that time, since 2019? So California's built 550,000 housing units, nowhere close to the 3.5 million needed by 2025. Now, if you think about housing units, it's usually dependent on supply and demand curve, right? Is there demand, they'll build the housing. If there's no demand, no one's gonna reach out and build it. Plus, you got the interest rates, you got a lot of different factors. We had COVID hit, we had supply chain issues, we have retirees, people retiring out. It's challenging. It really, really is challenging. So for those of you that remember, what was our allocation in Newport Beach? The state mandates housing for every city in California. Back then in 2020, they mandated 4,845 housing units. This is the most that we've ever seen in the history of Newport Beach. Those of you that have been following and tracking this, the state mandates housing. They've been mandating housing since the 60s for all cities in California. Well, housing provides places people live, you have housing near work, you develop your community, your village. So, housing is important just from a job perspective. But this number is the highest number we've ever seen, and now we had to plan where those housing units are going to go. So we've developed a plan, and a lot of you were part of that plan development. We had a different housing committee meetings. We had a lot of community input. And then you could see there on the screen the number that we have planned in each of the focus areas. And I'm going to go through the focus areas. Some of this material you've seen before. I've added a lot of new material. So I can talk about how we're going to implement this. This is the airport area. This is the magenta color you see in the airport area. Those properties that are in magenta, those are identified as housing opportunities. Now, the state tells the cities, you have to provide the opportunities. Well, we did that. We're doing that. The city's not in the development business. This is giving a landowner, a property owner, if you want that opportunity, if you want that chance to build housing, here's the opportunity. These are housing opportunity sites that we've had to plan throughout the entire city. So there are the airport areas. You could see the magenta colors. Now Newport Center, you see those magenta colors. Those are housing opportunity sites. You could see on the Fashion Island Mall, we've dumped housing units. It's not to say that we're going to remove and get rid of the mall. I mean, that's a huge tax base for us. That's our retail center. But if Irvine Company is interested in adding housing units to densify the center, that's an opportunity that we're developing for them, plus all those surrounding properties around that Newport Center. As all of you know, the office market is very soft. It's very challenging. Office properties are trading for almost pennies on the dollar, very discounted rates. There are opportunities that we're developing that if they would like to demo that office tower and build housing, those opportunities are being created. You can see there on the West Newport, we have housing opportunities. Dover, West Cliff area, more housing opportunities. And then, believe it or not, on the Coyote Canyon landfill, there's actually opportunities way to the north. To the north, there's not a landfill. To the north, it's just real dirt. And then portions to the south, the landfill is extremely shallow. There is discussion. It's like, what if we truck the trash out? What if we build to the north? So again, it's an opportunity. The county controls the site. The county wants golf course. There may be some type of long-term play where there's going to be housing in the future, but you can't build housing on a landfill. You can't do it. But to the north, you could build some housing. To the south, if you relocate some of the trash, which is shallow, you could build housing. So I've taken all those magenta colors, put them on another slide, and now I'm sharing with you. You could see globally where all those housing opportunities. And at the same time, looking at this map, you could see where the housing opportunities are not. They're not on the peninsula. They're not on the islands. They're not in Corona del Mar. They're just more focused on those commercial areas of town. So in 2022, we completed our housing element, and we got that compliant with housing and community development. There are a number of Orange County cities that still are not certified by HCD. You can see that on the screen. I was actually shocked to see that County of Orange still doesn't have a certified housing element. That's going to be a problem for the county. There is builder's remedy, which I'll talk about here at the end, in the sense that if you don't have a certified housing element, by February, a developer could come in and almost build anything they want in either your city or in your county. We have a certified housing element. It's compliant with the state, and we're focusing on implementation and ultimately a vote, which I'm going to talk about here shortly. So what is this housing element? The housing element is very similar to construction documents. You first develop plans before you can build a home. Right? That's what the housing element is. It's a plan for how you're going to provide these housing opportunities inside your city. And it's all the cities in California. Southern California is getting hit the most with all the housing opportunities. That's what this housing element is, right? We've developed a plan for housing opportunities that address all income levels throughout the city. So with the housing element, that's our plan. Now we have to implement that plan. That's that action. And so we have 4 additional documents that we have to create, and we have to get approved by the city council. One of them is our land use element. That dictates the use of properties, similar to the general plan land use element that we have now, which identifies where the commercial areas of town are. Then you have to create the actual code language, the zoning, for the housing opportunities, right? This is part of the implementation that's required by the state. Also, how do these buildings, what are they going to look like, right? We have to have objective design standards as far as the design of these buildings. Then finally, you always have to do the EIR, you have to do CEQA, and we're in that process now. So I'm going to talk about each one of these. And all this we have to get done by February 2025. That's our drop dead date. And there's penalties if we're not compliant by that date. So let's talk about the land use element. So the land use element are taking those housing units and adding them to another document that really kind of dictates where housing is going to be, the land use designations, and it develops policies on what a maximum allocation of those housing units are. So on the screen there, you can see that for the airport area, we have a development limit of 2,577 units. So those areas that you saw, that green map, so now we're adding those areas into our land use element, and we're defining what are those limits of development. We're going to max out at, once we hit 2,577 units, then there's no further allocation of units in that airport area. We have a few other focus areas that we could focus on from a housing opportunity standpoint. So your land use element, I mean, I know this is a dry subject, but I'm really trying to kind of drive the point across, is really going to dictate your density, your allocation, and there are going to be several policies that go with all these this allocation for each of the focus areas. So I put on the screen just an example of what one of the policies are, and it talks about that maximum allocation in the airport area, which is the 2,577 units, and kind of focusing even further for the airport area, what that policy is, what that allocation is. It says accommodate up to 2,577 dwelling units. So when you look at it in totality, you have 6 different focus areas. We still have Banning Ranch. I know that's always been a question. That was a council policy decision. HCD did not recognize Banning Ranch as a viable area. We've taken those units, we've redistributed it around throughout the city, but Banning Ranch remains in our housing element, and it'll continue to remain in our housing element. So what does that mean? So we've drafted the land use element, we've drafted those amendments, those are available online, and I'll show you the link. But the city has it's a charter city. We have Charter Section 423, and that charter says that if you're going to add 100 units or more in a statistical area, you got to go to a vote of the people, and that's our green light. So if you've never seen where the statistical areas are, that's the map that shows the statistical areas. So each of those squares or those polygons define a statistical area. If you add 100 units into any one of those, now you've triggered your Charter Section 423. Now it requires a vote, and a vote of all of you in November. So I'm just going to look at the airport area. That's what we focused on the most because it's kind of that box. We've dropped, we're planning for 2,577 housing units. It's greater than 100. Now we have to go to a vote of everybody. And that is going to be prepared, and it's going to be a ballot measure for the November ballot. And that applies to all those areas, right? Each of those statistical areas, you add more than 100 units through a general plan amendment. If you're amending the general plan, which is the city is doing, that's what triggers the vote. Again, that's the green. I'm just kind of showing you where the housing opportunities are and relative to your statistical areas. And then we talked about what that vote is. And so that's going to be a ballot measure. And it's going to say, are you willing to accept this change to your land use element, to accept all these housing units? And I'll talk about if that vote fails. It's not going to be good for the city if the vote fails, unfortunately. But I do encourage everybody to vote on November. So let's talk about a little bit on that zoning overlay. So we talked about what's in the land use element. It defines your general plan land uses, and that's where your office and mixed use are defined. And now you're going to add housing, right? So those are your housing opportunity sites. You need code language. You need to develop that code language that defines the zoning for these housing opportunities. This is an overlay. This is something that is another zoning that we're creating. It's called the, let me see here, I'm trying to read it. It's the HO overlay, the housing opportunity overlay. So when you do development, you always look at the zoning code to see what your zoning opportunities are. What is your zoning for different properties, right? So you have C for commercial, you have R for residential. Now we've created a new one. It's called the HO, and that's your housing overlay. So that's the zoning language that we're creating. And that is consistent with our housing element, and it sets the development limits, development standards, and area-specific standards. So a lot of legalese to talk about your setbacks, your height, kind of the design characteristics, and what the use of it is too. So you always have your general plan, which is very general. Then you add your zoning on top of it, which is much more specific, and that's the zoning that we've created. The other part of this process is that we really don't have any design standards. If somebody's going to build medium to high density residential projects in Newport, what's the design going to look like, right? So what do you think? This is an ugly design or this is a good design? I kind of think it's an ugly design, right? It's a prison. We don't want that, right? I found something a little contemporary, a little bit better from a design, right? Maybe not. It may not satisfy everybody's interest, but we're looking ahead. It's like what is the design going to look like for these housing projects, right? So we've developed objective design standards, and they cover a lot of what I've just talked about on the design side, from the parking lots to your private street to your residential fronts, right? So we talk about what the design is going to look like as we go forward. We have different parts of this. This has been on the street for a while. We have some comments from architects that have made some comments on it. What we want to see is articulation in these buildings, either horizontal articulation or vertical articulation, and it sets some standard for design. What's good about this document, this objective design standards, we could always change it in the future. This is not set in stone. This is kind of the first pass. We've put it out in the street. We've gotten some public comment, and we could always fine-tune it as we go forward. Next, we want to talk about our EIR and our CEQA clearance. So the way we approach the EIR for this project with all these housing opportunities, you got to study the impacts. And so the way we did it is that let's look at the existing office buildings now and the existing trips and keep them there. And then on top, let's just add the housing, the new housing and the new trips, and see what those impacts are. So these are cumulative impacts that we're studying. In reality, we don't think 90% of the projects are not going to be this, where they're going to add housing to an existing office building. What we think is going to happen is that they're going to eliminate the office building and then just build the housing. Therefore, your trips are going to be substantially reduced, right? Office generates enormous amount of trips, even though they're vacant. Most of them are sitting there a little bit more vacant. From studying the analysis, we took the worst extreme, which is the residential cumulative to the office, but in reality, what you're going to see is just that elimination of office, and you're just going to see the residential. And those trips, that traffic is just going to get reduced over time. So we've completed the draft EAR. It's on the street. You're more than welcome to take a look at it. We're encouraging comments. And some of the comments that we've seen so far, not comments, I'm sorry, some of the significant and unavoidable impacts are listed there on the screen. So you have aesthetics, which is light and glare. It deals with some of the kind of the bigger massing of some of the residential projects. You have a lot of impacts due just to the construction, right? So when you talk about air quality, you're talking about those are the impacts due to your diesel vehicles, your trucks, your bulldozers, material transfers, material delivery. Cultural resources, that's really affected in existing buildings that are greater than 50 years old. Greenhouse gas emissions, again, that's more construction related. That's focusing on just the diesel trucks I talked about. Same thing with the noise. The utilities service, and that's an interesting one. The City of Newport Beach adopted, I gotta find my notes here, give me a second, Urban Water Management Plan back in June 2021. So that's a document that all cities adopt, I wanna say every 5 years. And it talks about the future of water for the city. Well, when we adopted in 2021, it did not include all these housing opportunities. So when the consultant does their EIR analysis, they look at what our plan says, our urban water management plan, and it didn't address the housing opportunities, and they said, well, that's going to be a significant impact. This is the same issue with every single city that is going through this process of developing housing opportunities, where they adopted a water management plan and it doesn't address all these housing opportunities. The future water management plan will address the housing opportunities, but right now the EIR is saying that there is a significant impact. If you talk to our utilities director, Mark Vrgojevic, he'll tell you we got plenty of water. We got an enormous amount of water. You know, we have water wells in Fountain Valley, plus we offset and augment with the Colorado River. So we don't have any issues with our utilities. I am seeing a little bit on the sewer capacities that need to be upgraded, so we're addressing those as we go forward. But from a water standpoint, we got plenty of water. You talk to Edison is happy to provide power too. Transportation. So in today's environment, the CEQA law has changed. We don't look at level of service anymore from a CEQA perspective. So we look at VMTs, and so those are vehicles miles traveled. So if you have housing next to office, those VMTs are reduced. So the EIR did not come out with any impacts that's related to traffic. We have completed a level of service study in addition to the EIR. That's going to be released tomorrow. I want to say, I got to go back through it again. I want to say there's 1 or 2 intersections that may be impacted from a level of service standpoint, but we're not seeing anything widespread. From an EIR standpoint, there's no impact because, again, the state now uses vehicles miles traveled, VMT. It doesn't use LOS anymore. So all this is available online. I know it's riveting information, a lot of reading. I know it's very dry, but this is what we're mandated to do. All these implementation documents that we have to prepare and put it out there for the public to review. And then there's an email address up there if you want to comment on that. The EIR comments are due March 28th. And then from a schedule standpoint, we are scheduling to take all this information, all these documents to the Planning Commission April 18th. Then we're going to have to go to ALEC afterwards, and then to the City Council by July. The last day for us to get this on the ballot is going to be August 9th. So if we go in July, we don't have to worry about it. But if we miss July 23rd, I have to get everything wrapped up with the City Council before August 9th. And then it gets on the ballot. And then it goes to a vote of all of you. And then the questions I always get, like, what happens if the vote fails? I'm deeply hoping that it passes, because if it passes, we have more control. We have control with our designs. We have control with the housing opportunities. If the vote doesn't pass, the state created something called Builder's Remedy. And what Builder's Remedy is, it gives a lot of authority to the developers because cities are not compliant. We're starting to see that in different cities where cities have not developed their housing element. We have a compliant housing element. Now we're trying to implement that housing element. Builder's Remedy is not better for us. It's worse for us. What we've complied with state law. It's been mandated. We're developing the implementation. We have design standards. We have housing opportunities. We get to keep that control, that limited control that we have left. We get to keep that if that vote passes. If it doesn't pass, what we'll probably have to do is go to the judge, go to a court, say, we have a charter here, we have a state mandate here. We think we've complied. The residents don't want this. What should we do next? It's possible the court may say, well, amend your plan again and go back out to another vote. It may be possible where the courts say, okay, you've done your best. I think the takeaway is, and a lot of this is gray, we've never been in this position before where you have conflicting mandates, a charter and a state mandate, and they're conflicting with each other. We've never had that happen before. So there's no case law on this. What we've seen with just trial courts with different cities, courts are not sympathetic to cities at all. They're saying, well, the state has a housing crisis. You need to implement this and you need to adopt this. Staff's opinion that if this doesn't pass, you don't have control on the density limits, the height limits, the design standards. And it's going to be unfortunate if it doesn't pass. That's why we're pushing forward with our implementation. We're going to go to City Council, and hopefully the council will adopt everything and then put this on the ballot. A couple of little news clips there. You could see Beverly Hills does not have a compliant housing element. So a judge has told Beverly Hills, you cannot permit remodels anymore. You can only permit new construction. So a judge has told the city of Beverly Hills you cannot permit anything other than new residential construction. No more house remodels, no more kitchen remodels, right? So they're trying to penalize the city. I've heard Beverly Hills is not compliant with the judge's order, and now they're fighting it out even further now in the courts. Huntington Beach has pushed back a lot on the state mandates. That has to get tried. We wish them best of luck as they go forward with that. Fullerton got sued by realtors and housing advocates because they don't have a compliant housing element. They settled out of court. They said they're going to comply with state law. And then in Santa Monica was behind the curve with regards to adopting their housing element. And so what happened, a developer came in with 4,000 units under builder's remedy and submitted to the city, and the city could not stop it. So 4,000 units got dropped off at the city. Says, we're building this, you can't stop us. And it's true, Santa Monica could not stop it. So I am encouraging all of you to take a look at kind of the downside with not passing this ballot measure. I know it's a tough issue for the city. I know that we've never been through this before, but this is the state mandate. We've been working towards this, and a lot of you participated in the process. So thank you to all of you that put a lot of time into this. A lot of you made comments. A lot of you expressed your opinions, and it's been a long road, right? Since 2019, we've been working on this. That's all I had for the presentation. I know it was riveting. But happy to answer any questions. You have a microphone right there, so if you want to line up on the microphone. There's a microphone here in the middle of the aisle.
Thank you for this, because I know you put a lot of work into it, and this is going to be an uphill battle for you. It's not on.
It's
Hello?
just talk loud.
Okay. Thank you. Well, that's what I said. Right there?
No.
Thank you. Thank you for your work. It's an uphill battle for you, and you're doing the best you can for the city, and
Thank you.
I feel appreciated. In the first couple of slides that you did that were the areas that were identified as building places to build. Two questions. Does that equal your 4,800 units or more?
So there on the slide, there on the screen. So when you add up all those housing opportunity areas, it adds up to 8,174 units.
Now, what do you consider extremely low or very low income in any of those areas, especially Newport Center?
So let me see if I have it.
Do we, meaning the city, get to say, okay, very low income is this and this, and you can't sell it for more than this? Or you can buy, it's,
Yeah.
whatever you want to sell it for.
So
but we're gonna,
I get this question a lot. What is low income for Newport Beach? So it's not Newport Beach's average; it's the county average. So the county sets the average income level. I don't have the income levels on the screen, but this is kind of the percentage breakdown. Typically, it's at this point now, because the county sets the average for moderate, for a family of four that makes $120,000 or less can qualify for moderate income unit. And then it's broken down from a percentage from that. So take 80% of that and then down to 50% of that. So 50% of $120,000 is $60,000 for a family of four. They would qualify for a very low income unit. So if a developer develops a very low income unit here in Newport Beach, it'll have to be rented to a very low income family. And there is a process they go through to qualify for that unit. And then they can qualify for a very low income unit.
so these could be rentable units not purchased.
They could be purchased too. We have one project pending that has affordable for sale product. It's very hard to make it pencil for sale.
Right.
But it can be for sale. We have one project that's pending right now that's going to be a for sale project.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
So, sorry. To add on to that, then, have you identified future areas for the next time the state comes down and hands you this?
And that's an excellent question, actually. What we've seen in the past, and this is not going to predict the future, we think the state's going to give everybody kind of a freebie for the next cycle. So our cycle ends, I don't want to say 2028, 2029, and then the new cycle starts. We don't think they're going to dump more housing units on the next cycle on us because it's taken us time to implement this. It takes time for the private markets to actually develop the housing. We think 2 cycles later, they may end up doing the same. But it's hard to predict where the state's going to go with any of this stuff.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to thank you. I want to thank you also for your presentation. Who benefits from building these units? Are there builders that get a contract from the city? Are they independent builders?
Yeah, we're the city's not in the building
Involved.
industry at all, right? So we by state constitution, we control the use of land. But the state says, yeah, but you got to provide some housing, right? You have to provide housing, and not only some housing, we want you to plan for a lot of housing. So that's what we're doing, and that's what we've done. So who benefits from it? If there's a property owner that controls one of these housing opportunity sites, they may benefit from it. If there's no debt on a property, the office market is soft, they may want to convert a property over to residential. But I wouldn't say it's going to be an automatic. You're going to get this massive influx of housing because you still have supply and demand curves. You have labor shortages. Construction is really, really expensive right now. Interest rates are really, really high. And if you have debt on a property, there's no way you're going to be able to get a loan to turn that property into.
I guess my question is it always a private transaction? I'm the owner, I sell to developer A, B, or C. It's always a private transaction
Yes.
between individuals, residents of New. So how are you going to force residents to sell their property for new housing units?
So another good question.
I'm confused.
Again, at the end of the day, the city is obligated to provide the opportunity. I can't make you do anything. I can't.
So what exactly is that opportunity? Do you come to me and say, we'd like to buy your house, or we'd like to buy your commercial building?
The opportunity is created by the color on the screen, the housing opportunity. The opportunity is that, do you want to develop housing? That's the opportunity that's presented to the property owner. Do they want to build housing? Some have expressed yes. I want to tear down my office building and I want to build housing.
Okay, so there's going
Without
to be
that
a conversion.
opportunity, they couldn't do that.
So there's going to be a conversion from commercial to residential, it sounds like.
Correct.
From what you.
Yes.
My other question is, it looks like Orange, Huntington Beach, some of these other cities, they've just kicked the can down the road without really a lot of penalty. So is this state mandate going to change in the future? Can it change with new administration? If the residents of Newport Beach say, no, we don't want to do this, and we get punished for it,
Yeah.
it takes years to get the punishment.
It may take some time for the punishment. Orange is going to get forced to comply here very soon. So I've been tracking what they're doing. What the state wants to do, the state doesn't want to get into litigation like anybody. Nobody wants to get into litigation. But they will put pressure on cities. They'll give them a little bit more time to come into compliance. If they can get Orange to comply, that they're better off doing it that way, and they may give them a little bit more time to comply. Huntington Beach is going to be a different story. Huntington Beach, as you know, they're going to fight the fight. I think the penalties are going to come, right? Those penalties, we've seen them in the past with City of Encinitas, where the courts have mandated that they're going to adopt the housing element. This is their pass cycle, or they're going to get hit with severe fines.
And where does that number come from, the 4,800? What is that based on?
So that number is what the state has allocated. It went through a process. They've moved a lot of residential units from the Riverside counties over to the beach cities, and all the beach communities got hit with double the amount of housing than originally planned. Your question is like, where does this number come from? Good question. The state never justified it.
Isn't it cheaper to build inland than on the coast?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But we're stuck with this number, unfortunately. Yes.
Given the fact that the city councils recently excused the League of California Cities, given the fact that the city council has recently excused themselves from the League of California Cities, how might this impact the future of the plan. And if there is consternation between the city and the state, might that be cutting the nose off to spite our face?
So, so the City of Newport Beach has voted, the council voted to remove itself from the League of California Cities. So in California, there's an association where all the cities participate in, and there is dialogue about state bills, there's leadership training. So it's an advocacy group. We removed ourselves from that organization because the league made certain decisions that was contrary to the positions taken by our city council. The question was, is that going to hurt us as we go forward? We fought this fight for the last 5 years with the state, right? We fought SCAG, we fought the state, and got nowhere. It's not going to, there's no harm for us to pull out of league at all, right? We've already done the fight, got nowhere with anybody. So pulling out of the league, is that going to hurt us? It can't hurt us at this point. It's not going to hurt us as we go forward, but we have to implement, and that's going to be what's important right now. Hi.
So 2 questions. What I see, and for my life experience and my quality of life in our town, is over in West Newport, we have so many amazing small businesses that we can go to locally and that make our quality of life great because it's local. You know, it's car maintenance,
Sure.
it's, upholsterers,
Right.
it's this and that are there. And it looks to me that you guys are saying that is something that we can do without. So I would just say I really disagree with that. And our quality of life in Newport is going to go down with the loss of those businesses over there. Second of all, what my understanding is that ADUs, we've worked hard to try to make those qualify for your numbers. Have you had many, and maybe you can explain that, percentage and all that to people, but have you had many permit requests and any builds that have gone with that so far?
Yes. So let me address your first part, the loss of those uses. I think what's important as we go forward, you just look at I just focus on the airport area because it's kind of more rectangular or square-like. With all these housing opportunities that are being planned, what is the build out? How long is it going to take for all these units to be built out? I said 20 years, maybe 25 years, right? What we want to make sure is that we capture those retail uses. We capture those sales tax dollars. What we don't want to do is provide all this housing opportunity and then they migrate over to Irvine and spend their money because we're going to lose out on all that retail revenue, that sales tax revenue. So first step right now, we want to implement this. We want to develop our implementation plan, get the documents done, get it approved by council, go to a vote, and then see what happens with the results. In the future, we got to plan out the airport area. We got to identify where's going to be the retail for that airport area. And that applies really to everywhere in town because we have to be smart as we plan the city going forward. Right now, it's one step at a time. There's only so much we can do. We're going to plan for the housing opportunities. We'll do that. The next step, we got to plan for the retail opportunities. Where's the park going to go? Up in the airport area. And I use the airport area as an example. Talked about, we're going to lose some of our vendor resources in the West Newport to go get your car fixed. I agree with you. There's going to be a loss of certain uses. So for West Newport, we like to endeavor into a specific plan of how do we make sure that we comply with state law and at the same time we allow opportunities for additional businesses and retail uses. Is there a mixed use approach? There's a lot of work ahead of us. Right now, what we're going to focus on, get to July, get to November, and then afterwards, we'll be able to kind of focus on doing some real planning for these different parts of town. Yes. Oh, sorry. Yes, ADUs. So if you're tracking with state law has said you can build an accessory dwelling unit on your property. You can convert a bedroom into a dwelling unit and rent it out. You can convert a garage space into a dwelling unit and rent it out. That's something that the cities can't stop, or even HOAs cannot stop it. So that is something that state law mandates. We've allowed it. We have an ADU website if you're ever interested in ADUs. We've permitted, I want to say, about 120 ADUs. We're generating a number of them each year. I want to say maybe about 40 ADUs per year. Those are smaller units. Those can be rented out for a much more affordable rate. So we get credit with the state. Every year I have to report to the state how many affordable units we've built, how many we've permitted. All that gets translated in a annual report, and we send it up to the state of California for them to review. So we are getting credit for those ADUs that we're developing. Hey, Jim.
I have a couple of questions. First of all, the concept that implementing this plan will reduce the number of trips because commercial office buildings will be replaced by residential. Isn't it true in the plan that is being proposed, the entitlement for the commercial square footage will remain? And if the building is replaced, that entitlement can be used somewhere else? So I'm not following why the trips would go down.
So in my example, what we're seeing proposed is commercial being eliminated. Can that commercial square footage be moved somewhere else? It can, but we don't project that office space is going to get moved to another office location.
Okay. Second question, you've made it clear that the city has to provide the opportunities. It doesn't have to do the building. But there are consequences if the housing does not materialize in the 8 years or perhaps in the next cycle. And if the housing does not materialize, is that also regarded as being out of compliance?
So the city doesn't control the private markets. It doesn't control the capital markets. If housing's not getting built, it's not because the city didn't provide the opportunities. We provide the opportunities for private property owners to do what they want with their properties, right? We're not going to get penalized per se because we're not producing an enormous amount of housing units. I think there could be a problem if we produce 0 housing units. I think that's problematic. I think if we produce 0 affordable units, that's problematic because then they look at your plan and go, your plan doesn't work. I think there's other targets in Orange County besides Newport Beach. I think there's other cities the HCD is going to focus on. When you look at those cities in the county that does not even have a housing element, I think the attention is going to go there first. It's not going to come to Newport Beach.
Yeah, I would hope so. The question was just technically, would we be out of compliance and a builder could claim the builder's remedy against us if we had not produced those houses that we promised?
I don't think we're going to be out of compliance just because the private markets are not producing units.
Yes. And then as to the practicality of actually producing some units, I'm not quite following the concept why in these areas that we've designated, we're designating very specific properties only as having the opportunity and not offering it more generally so it was more flexible, that anybody similarly situated in those areas could convert their building. As I understand it, this is just people who at this moment expressed an interest, but over the 8 or 20 years, someone else might express an interest. So how is that going to be handled?
No, I think that's a legitimate question. The state wanted to ensure that properties would turn over in this cycle to housing. So we formed a housing committee, and their job was to look at these parcels. Is there a high probability that a specific parcel could turn over into housing? You couldn't blanket all over the airport area that every property is going to be housing. That's going to be ridiculous amount, right? We were targeted, we were focused. What parcels could and had a higher potential to turn over to housing? Plus, you have to get letters from property owners that say, "Yeah, I'm going to turn it over to housing." So the way we did it, the way through the housing committee, the way they formed their subcommittees, they went through every single parcel. That was required by state law.
Yeah. But what I'm trying to say is now that we've demonstrated there's a possibility, why are we limiting, and we have a limit on how many could be developed total, why are we limiting still just to those properties we use to demonstrate the possibility? Why are we not opening it to everybody? It would seem more equitable. And we still have the limit, so we're not going over the limit. Why are we doing it this way? I don't understand.
Yeah, again, we've been working on this for 5 years, Jim, and again, we had to identify per state law those properties that were specifically could turn over to housing. So now to go back and relitigate this and redo the documents again to say blanket it all over, that wasn't what we got certified with HCD.
Okay, and then the final question is, we have a quota in each of these 4 income categories.
Yes.
Historically, we have done sort of okay in the very low income because the builders have an incentive for that. We've always done more than okay in the high level, above moderate, because the developer obviously has an incentive to do that. We've never done well on the low income or the moderate, especially the moderate. I believe in our last RENA cycle, we had a quota in the low and the moderate categories of only 1, and it was only at the very end of the 8 years that we developed any moderate. So how are we going to possibly, even over 20 years, reach the 1,000 moderate quota unless we invent some incentive to produce that?
Yeah, I think it's a legitimate concern. Like, how are we going to encourage more of those lower end units? Again, we're relying on the private markets. The state has incentives that they developed for developers when they want to develop projects to include some level of affordability. As I said, this is not going to happen all in one cycle. I think there's a long build-up process as we go forward, maybe 20 and 25 years. Yes.
40 years ago, I worked for the largest developer in the state.
Who's that?
Broadmoor Homes.
Oh, okay.
And at that time, the state mandated that all the builders build affordable housing. We crunched the numbers over and over and over again, and in this area, we couldn't do it. There was no way that anything we did would ever pencil out. So by the time you demolish some of those buildings and do all the things you have to do, it probably can't happen. So what the state did at that time was allow developers housing credits, and you could buy credits from a developer someplace else that could make it pencil out. And at that time, interest rates went up to 17%, and everybody closed their doors and went home for several years. So there's some history that makes this seem not feasible.
Sure. Yeah, I would agree with you. It's going to be very expensive. Land values are very expensive in Newport, and there's a higher probability that not all the properties are going to turn over to housing. And again, it's back to the private markets again. Hi.
Hello, good evening. My name is Madonna Buchanan. It's been a while since I've been in this area. I grew up in Laguna Beach, Newport Beach area. I had a couple of concerns. One, I guess, the bus depot here that I ride the bus from San Clemente here to see my friends, the restrooms are always locked. So I will say that I've been going around picking up trash, toilet paper, and I won't even say what I've picked up, but they're using the grounds out there for the restroom. So I don't know if maybe they want to open them up and monitor them. I don't know, because that's a health problem, really. Sure. Anyways, the cigarette butts, but I've been yelling at them about that. But I had a question on the land. No, I'm not. I never went to school on the land or how it is and all that stuff, but my concern that comes to mind is if you continue building, it's like a game. It's like you build and the pressure, and it's like, because I've been hitting all the beaches up and down the coast the last few days. I'm burnt, but the houses are sliding. To me, that would be a big factor that I would be talking about. These people are losing their homes that they worked very hard for. They're just going off the side of the hill. But with the building up here, is that pushing? I mean, maybe somebody could look into it, because to me, I think it's a factor. It's pushing, you know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Depending on how we are and how leveled the ground is, it's pushing things off.
Yeah.
So that would be a concern of mine. And then also I was wondering, with the hotels in the area, they're beautiful. I've walked through them. Most of them have maybe, 24 people staying in them. I know where I come from, Lake Tahoe, a lot of the littler hotels and motels are renting rooms out to qualified people, not people that are, drugged out or a bunch of I'm saying they look into who they are. Section 8 monitors it, and they're doing that in Lake Tahoe, and it's actually working out really well to get the people off your streets, because I know you guys don't want these people on your streets. Your streets are beautiful, by the way. So to get them off, and maybe you can make a deal with the hotels or motels that if these people qualify and they obey the rules, that they can, maybe rent it out and maybe get them started on their way of not being on the street.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay?
Thank you for
Thank
comments.
you very much. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, my name is Philip Betancourt, a former member of the city family, but a longtime observer of the housing element process as it has gone along. And I want to put in a good word not only for the staff and the consultants, but the number of hardworking volunteers who worked on the housing committee to begin with to pick out eligible sites. It's a serious bit of scholarship, and it is worth reading if you wonder why some properties are in and some are not. It has to do with feasibility, eligibility, probability, and it's a good read to understand that the palette of sites to work with now represent at least reasonably achievable opportunities to meet the building goals that are there. Not light reading, but good reading for anyone who's interested in the process.
Thanks, Phil. Thanks for the comments.
Thanks, Chuck. My name is Peter Belden. I just want to clarify the mandate a little bit so that I understand this. So the 4,814, whatever it is, like you said, Newport Beach is not in the home building business, so that's essentially out of our hands.
Correct.
So what we're really being held to is, are we doing enough to make that happen? Correct? So I guess another way of looking at it is the ultimate goal then, assuming that the majority of residents here in Newport don't agree with this and don't want this housing, that truly the goal here is to do the least amount possible to not get in the crosshairs of the state, especially when you've got that many other cities that are in far worse compliance than us. So maybe you could comment on so I looked at that and how are we ever going to do that? But now I'm understanding from what it appears that it's truly all we have to do is have a perception that we're doing what we can, and then the market's going to take care of itself.
But I'll agree with you. It's all market driven. It's all private market driven, right? So what was the minimum we have to do? Well, those 4 things that I have up on the screen, we've done them. We're doing them. We're going to ask the council to approve them, and then after that, we have to let the markets play it out, right? As I said, I don't anticipate a rush of housing developers coming here and tearing down the property. I think there's going to be easy properties to develop, and I think there's going to be hard properties that will never get developed. It's always private market driven. The city's not in the housing business. We control the use of property as far as the zoning, the general plan. We're doing all that. After that, it's the private markets, right? I mean, I talked to a developer, he's looking at a construction loan that's, the loan is 12%, right? 12% annual for a construction loan right now. I don't know who's doing big projects right now. It's tough. Yes.
Seimone, my name is Chuck Fancher. 3 questions. Should one view this housing element as simply and only an overlay of change in use to allow for different levels of residential in the stipulated areas, and that is the housing element change, just change of use for housing in areas that are not now zoned for residential?
True.
Is that the bottom line effect?
That's true.
Second question, let's just take the airport overlay area.
Mm-hmm.
If I wanted to develop low and moderate income housing there, would I be able to do it by right? That is, it couldn't be turned down by a planning commission or a city council if I meet all the criteria? Do I have a by right to develop that housing?
Yes. After
you.
all this is adopted.
Okay. Then I ask you this. Is it in this housing element should I not expect to find in this housing element, except I'll call it discretionary, ancillary, I shouldn't say discretionary, but ancillary provision, ancillary changes to be sought? You use design standards as one area that this housing element might address. But would it address things like if recycled water is provided by the city, that the developer would have to attach to it and use it?
No, it doesn't
Would that
address
be
that.
addressed elsewhere in the city code if that were
Correct.
the city's choice?
It'll have to be an ordinance of some nature to address something that's
Same thing for electrification, providing for EV charging and the like, that would be
Yeah.
in some other city ordinance.
I think when you look at like anything on the green side, EV
Yes.
charging or solar, the state's mandating all that anyway. You know, they've given up on cities implementing that. The state's just forcing all cities to comply with, you know, your green codes and all that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Real quick. Hello, testing. Well, you gotta talk to it like this, and then everybody can hear you. First of all, my understanding is on this voting that takes place in November, we either pass it, in which case the city of Newport Beach has opened it up, but it's left to the market to decide how they want to proceed.
Correct.
Or two, let's say it fails, then the result is you're leaving it at, what do you call it, builder's
remedy.
Builder's remedy,
Yeah.
which is essentially saying, if you don't pass this, the builders can come in and do whatever they want to do, and nobody wants that. So it's been said out loud that it needs to pass because that's the path of least resistance.
The city gets more control if it passes.
Right. Here's my real question.
Yes.
And it's more of a macro approach. We've been talking about a micro approach in the Orange County, Newport Beach area. I'm confused as to why the state wants to implement housing requirements on communities. Are they not looking at, and granted, this has been going on for a few years, but they're, for the, what is it, the first time in 100 years, 80 years, that California's population has gone down instead of up. Are there communities, counties throughout the state that have a zero housing mandate, or worse, a negative housing mandate to offset the Newport Beaches, Orange counties, LA County areas where they're saying you need to build 4,000 or 5,000 homes because everybody wants to live there and nobody wants to live in Yoho County. Yeah. So it is on a macro approach, are there counties that are, or areas that have been exempt from this requirement?
So some tough questions there. Why did the state mandate all this? You're going to have to ask the governor. I can't even start to defend the state or the governor. As far as any counties or cities that get zero, you probably need to look at the governor's hometown of Marin County and see what their allocation is, because I've heard they've gotten a lot of exemptions. I don't know if it's a zero, but it could be like a long delay. Yeah. All right, everybody.
Hey, thank you, Seimone. All right, one quick one.
I feel I have to represent the undesirables that you're talking about. I'm a senior and I live in affordable housing. There is a section where low income. We have been targeted as crime-ridden drug addicts, undesirable people, people that have no money, that don't belong here. And I really am hearing a lot of anxiety, overcrowding. My life is going to be different. I'm no different than any other human being here. And we need to have, this is fair. And by the time you get that built, it'll be 20 years. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, well, Seimone, thank you very much. Appreciate you taking time to come this evening. Very informative. Give Seimone a big hand here. Does a lot of work for us. Okay, we're not going to have a program in April, but May 8th is our next program, so watch for our announcements. And until then, stay safe, and we'll see you next month.